All right, next question comes from Thick420, another OG Patreon contributor. I was wondering what your thoughts are on doing low rep squats for a lot of volume. While I do love running through base phases, the high rep squats really boils my piss. It'll do that. Thing is that when I get deep into sets, I tend to increasingly rely on my posterior chain, even though I'm trying to do a very knees forward quad dominant squat. I find that doing lower reps for many, many repeating sets with short rest periods helps me maintain that focus on keeping the knees forward while also somewhat resembling capacity work. Do you see any pitfalls? I'm essentially doing an equal amount of volume, so I figured it'd be okay, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. So this is an important point to get down. It's how these different set and rep schemes and volume recommendations play out in real life and how similar or different they are. So you can absolutely structure your entire training around low rep work. There's people that do that. I'm not a huge fan of it because I think it does require a little bit more precision and it requires a lot of discipline, a lot of delayed gratification. Because when you tell somebody to do triples, many, many people are going to end up, whether intentionally or not, doing the heaviest triples they can, even when they're supposed to be really, really light. So if you're looking at a Shako program, looking at one of these Soviet or Eastern type programs where it's basically Olympic lifting for powerlifting, and if you're supposed to be doing triples at 70%, that's like a 12 or 15 rep max, low RPE. So your initial training in the volume or accumulation blocks might be tons of triples, just like he's saying, tons of low rep sets at very low RPE, but it's the total amount of work that you're doing with the frequency that really eats you up and creates that training stress. So that makes sense for a very more technically specific approach. And that's why there are some schools of thought that apply it, and it can be successful. It's a much more skill specific approach, which is why you see a lot of specialized lifters doing it. You know, you'll see a lot of the big IPF monsters training like that. And there is somewhat of a benefit to that. However, the reasoning behind wanting to switch to that, I mean, he even said it, high rep squats really boils my piss. Well, people don't like high rep squatting. It's hard. The reason I like it, that I lean on it, is because it does save you from a lot of these pitfalls. It's, I don't want to say more idiot proof, but you don't have to walk such a tightrope with your training. Spend a couple of waves doing high rep volume. Most people are so deconditioned from it that they grow immediately without having to worry about all of these like higher level, really high-minded programming strategies. They can just incorporate the work. They grow. By the time it's time to jack the weight up and get a little bit heavier, they're primed for that and they start growing again. So that's why I like it. This instance in particular, he's trying to do this upright knees forward quad dominant squat, and he finds when he gets fatigued, he starts dipping forward. So that can mean a couple things. If technique on one of these lifts is breaking down, and that curve is going to be different for everybody and for every lift. Like you might find that your squat and your bench is great and you can take it to this point of fatigue and it's fine, but your deadlift, you know, the same percentage, your technique starts breaking down twice as fast. So you have to massage these numbers based on your ability. And technical breakdown is always where the set is over. So if you're supposed to be doing 60% for, let's say, 12 reps, and you find that you just break down technically at 8 because, you know, one muscle group or one part of your body fatigues just at a faster rate than the other, that means you're not using 60%. That means you need to go down. You might use 50. You might use 40 if you have to. Now, the benefit of doing that is that you will advance quickly as you let yourself acclimate to that volume of work and to that level of fatigue with good position. You just have to be patient and let the work do what it's supposed to do. And you can't do that if you're letting yourself get pitched forward and you're grinding out reps in this ugly position. So technical execution is always thing number one. Do not let yourself slip into a worse position as you fatigue just to get reps, because that fosters bad habits. It prevents you from strengthening the part of you that's lagging or that's weak or that's causing that breakdown. It's much less specific. So you're not developing good technical habits that you need to rely on when the weight gets heavy. I mean, think of all the places you see this. Tipping forward on a squat is one. First few might look really good, and then they look worse and worse and worse. At that point, you're not even training the same movement pattern. With a deadlift, I see this with lockouts. This is the one I hate. When people and this is why I get so passionate about posture in the deadlift. Shitty lockouts, a big reason people struggle with their lockouts is because they allow themselves to get into a shitty position. They allow the shoulders to dump, the midsection to go soft, so they just round. And that habit, it gets worse with reps, it gets worse with subsequent sets, and eventually you condition it to get worse as the weight gets heavier. And you see these guys where they'll lock out the first few pretty good, and then you get 4, 5, 6 reps in, and it looks like shit. The knees are locking out first, or they're like shaking on the way up, or they're having to bounce a bar off their quads, and they'll get through 3 or 4 reps like that because they can, just to get through the set. Technical breakdown determines when the set is over, and you have to adjust weight accordingly. Something like the lockout of a deadlift, that's the mechanically strongest part of the lift. Mechanically, it's like the strongest movement you can do. You get guys that squat 400 pounds and maybe deadlift 450. If you put the bar above their knee and let them take it out of a rack, if they're in a good upright position, I mean, you're going to have guys stand up with 600, 700 pounds. You're so strong. There's no reason for that shit other than you let ego and the willingness to kill yourself determine your training decisions. And that's not what we're doing here. So I strongly recommend toughing it out because it will teach you how to make appropriate weight selection and getting used to those reps. It happens so absurdly quick, and it is so vital. It is so vital for so many people. It's this big blind spot that people never engage with. So the fatigue, and again, newer, less developed lifters or more intermediates or people with like form breakdowns like this is a great way to solve those form breakdowns instead of trying to obsess over like exotic movements that you think are going to target one weak point. Learn how to last with good technique for more work, for more reps through higher levels of fatigue. It's such a fantastic, useful way to do it. You just have to approach it right. That's really the difference. It's the localized fatigue that you get from the individual set versus all the work together. And it's much easier to get to that level in one set than it is to try to program it so you're getting the right amount over one workout or subsequent workouts. And you're saying like the volume's the same. Like even if the total number of reps are the same, fatigue is very different. And in real life, the way that plays out is that the lower fatigue one is more specific because it's closer to what you're going to do with heavier weights, fewer reps, tighter technical execution. So I'm not going to say that's not going to work, but I think you're trying to jump ship for the wrong reasons. I would strongly recommend you stick with the volume that I prescribe, really just to show that you can. Doesn't mean you have to stick with it forever, but try it that way. Try bringing the weight down. Try adapting at a natural rate, using technical breakdown as the cap of where the set's over and letting that dictate where your weights are. I think you'll be very, very surprised at how things evolve over time.